Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mother Days podcast. I am your host, Sarah Wright Olsen.
And I'm Teresa Palmer. And we've been looking forward to this episode for a really long time.
Yay! We are so blessed and we feel so honored to have the two women that are here with us today, Nikki Reed and Abby Vidikan. Thank you guys so much for being here. As you guys know, Nikki's been on our show before. She's one of our dear friends. She's a mama boss. She has now 2 children, and she has her amazing company, Buy with Love, and so many things. And with her today is a very dear and special human being who we are so excited to talk to, Abby Vidikan, who is a home birth midwife. She's also prenatal labor, postpartum support. I have heard the most amazing things about you and the way that you care for the people that are your clients, friends, whatever you want to call it, these mothers that are under your care. I'm so excited to get into all the things and to hear all about it. And Nikki today is sharing with us her birth story. Oh my gosh.
Yay. Love a birth story.
We love a birth story. Thank you to our sponsor, Needed, for powering this week's episode. Use code MOTHERDAYS, DAZE, for 20% off your first month with Needed's premium perinatal supplements. And this is really special because, like, when do you have the person who's birthing and the midwife in the same place? So thank you guys so much. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. First of all, you need to have an entire episode with just Abby. I pulled her into this. Lucky me. But it's mostly so that I can spend an hour complimenting her and not have her run away from it, because I've stuck her right next to me, basically in the chair with me, so she can't leave. She put me in the corner. She's let me know she can't run out. But it's been a few weeks since I've had my babe, and in that time, I'm so happy that we've had a little bit of time between having him and then talking about this, because of what a difference Abby has made in our life and the impact that she's had in our life. And so I think the timing is just really beautiful, because had we spoken, right at his birth, it would be just about the birth, when really so much of, this journey and my relationship with Abby and my understanding of midwifery care, birth, postpartum has been in this period of time after, and how important that is for women. And that's, I want to talk about birth, but I also want to talk about that because it's been life-changing, let me tell you.
Wow. Amazing. Well, today we're going to give you the full space to have this whole conversation, however long this goes. If we need to break it up into 2 episodes, we can do that. I mean, it can be a birth and a postpartum. So we'll see how it goes. Don't even worry. But we're so excited to hear about all the things, because even watching you and your postpartum journey, I just feel like it's so rare to have the support that you've had. So I love that Abby is here with us today to have this conversation, because every woman deserves that kind of care. Every woman deserves to have someone there with them to answer the questions, to go through all of this. So we're really so honored that you're here today, and then Nikki, that you're going to share this story. So do you want to take us back to those the last few weeks?
My favorite time.
Me too. Because Tez and I know what was happening in those last few weeks. But share with the listeners, what was happening those last few weeks? Did everything come as a surprise, or were you wow, this is taking forever, and what's happening?
Right. Thank God you're here, guiding this conversation, because as you were talking, I was going, where are we going to start? There's so many things I want to talk about. And by the way, nobody loves birth. Sarah loves birth. but nobody loves birth as much as Teresa. Like, it's kind of next level. Like, she's definitely manifesting at least 10 kids in her.
I know. I've already got the seed planted. I was like, okay, Abby, I wonder if I have twins, if she would let me do home birth with twins. Cool, that would be really cool. I think she would. Yeah, she seems like the vibe. Yeah.
Definitely.
Oh my God.
Okay, so the last few weeks. So I wasn't even planning on having a midwife in my life because I had an OB who I love and trust, and he delivered me 35 years ago. And so I was like, you know what? I feel really taken care of, but something about my plan just didn't feel complete. And I was still like searching for things, I think, subconsciously. And so we should give credit where credit is due. So Ricky Lake, let's just drop it right here. Ricky Lake was having a gathering in her home for the business of being born, for the re-release of that film, which I'm sure has impacted everybody listening and the four of us here beyond measure. And so we were all sitting in this circle, kind of introducing ourselves. And I don't know if you remember, but that circle took 4 hours. Yeah. Everybody had so much to say. So like we went around the circle, and I was actually second to last, and there were 30 people in front of me. And I think it was like a 4-hour intro as every midwife in the circle introduced themselves and what they were passionate about. And not just midwives, but there were doulas and also a couple of OBs there as well. And Abby was sitting with my doctor, and I was watching their dynamic, and I had already heard Abby's name a couple of times from friends. And, you know, the two of you know this, I'm very sensitive to energy. And that is what means the most to me. Like, I don't care who somebody has worked with, how many births they even have under their belt, to me, it's like, if we connect on that level and I feel safe, then I know that you're my person, and maybe I'm your person, you know? So I was watching them for those 4 hours across from me, and how they were speaking. And I was just thinking, maybe that's my person, you know? And so
I don't think I've ever heard this.
So I walked over to see my doctor, Wright, you know, when all that was done, and Abby was sitting there, and I introduced myself and told her a little bit about, you know, my journey and what I was hoping for, which is like kind of the no plan is what I had going on at the time, which is, I know that I'm going to have an unmedicated birth. I mean, you know, it's what we're all going for, right? And I really hope that everything is smooth, and I'd love for it to be at home. And I'm also open to whatever the other possibilities are. I try to keep everything like whatever's meant to be. And from that moment on, Abby was like, she was like in my heart. I called her 2 days later and said, would you consider taking on another client? I know it's last minute. I'm, you know, 32, 33. Yeah, I was like, this is a lot. Do you even take on people in their last trimester? We don't know each other that well, and we're like walking right to the altar, you know? And so it was very sweet. Abby, first she told me like, yes, and I said, what does that look like? And she told me kind of like the standard care, like typically what that looks like. And of course, we really surpassed that in about 5 minutes. I think we've had more visits together than we've had with like our family members in the last 4 months.
I think, I mean, it's always kind of a challenge to try and take someone on late to care, because you're not able to necessarily build the same level of relationship with that person as if, you know, they started out with you, let's say at 10 weeks, right? You're talking about a limited amount of visits, a limited amount of time to really get to, you know their nuances and their quirks and kind of what makes them tick. And I think build that rapport and that level of trust that you should have going into birth, whether it's a home birth or a hospital birth, whatever it might be. But Nikki and I ended up spending something like an hour and a half on the phone in just that first call, you know, listening to the story of the first birth and kind of just talking through what she was looking for with this one, her care with her doctor, and just getting to know each other really on kind of like a soul level in that first conversation where it was like, okay, this is kind of a no-brainer. Like, this is someone that I'll enjoy working with, whether it's, seeing her 5 times or whether it's seeing her 25 times, which it seems like it's turned into. This will be a journey, and she's wrangling her child, and I've got my child like spraying me with a hose all while we're on the phone together. And it was fun. It was fun from the get-go. And there was certainly, just that very first conversation, I think like a connection, something that you just knew you would enjoy the next few weeks with that person for sure.
That's so
I talked to Abby about my first birth a lot, because there were definitely things as wonderful as that was. I mean, it was a beautiful experience. I knew that there were things, none of us know, except Teresa. The rest of us never know how many children we're going to have, right? So I kind of looked at this as like, if this were the last time I could have this experience, because you never know. What would I want that to be if I could manifest it? And sure, there are things that happen that are out of our control, but what would I want it to be? And so that's kind of where we started. And my first birth with my daughter, it was in the hospital. And while it was unmedicated, which is what I was going for, it was still all kinds of chaotic, for so many different reasons. I lived, an hour plus away from the hospital. My doctor at the time fell ill right before my delivery. And so I had a backup doctor that stepped in, and I only met with him, at 6 p.m. and I went into labor that same night. And it was just all kinds of chaotic. And I don't know if you remember from the last time I did this show, and I don't even know if I shared this before, but there was a lot of drama towards the end of it, just surrounding was my daughter growing enough in utero, and should we induce and should we not? And there's so much pressure put on the mother to know what you should do. And if you don't do it, the stakes are so high, right? Like if you don't do this, and then if something goes wrong, and then if this is your fault, and so you're carrying all this pressure. And I think I didn't realize that for this whole pregnancy, that little bit of, I don't want to call it trauma, but whatever that thing is that you still haven't totally unpacked was in the back of my mind going, could this happen again,
Yeah.
And so with this home birth that I really wanted to manifest, I was like, is this going to happen, or is it going to get all kinds of chaotic again? And so, again, leading up to this, there was a lot of talk about when my due date would be, and everybody thought that the baby was coming early. And rule number 1 for anyone listening, everyone needs to stop telling people when they think the baby is coming early.
The worst. I know.
Because really, it makes, if someone tells you your baby's coming 2 weeks early, it wasn't Abby, by the way, but if someone tells you your baby's coming 2 weeks early and then your baby comes 2 weeks late, those 4 weeks are an eternity.
It's so long.
But
yeah,
my baby was stationed really low at +1 even towards the end. And so I kept getting told wow, this is really low. I don't think the baby's going to stay in there even another 24 hours. And then lo and behold, we're going weeks and weeks, And so anyway, there was that fun drama. But it was the most, single-handedly the most beautiful experience of my life. And I say this, I don't mean to skip ahead, but I'm just going to skip to one part because I don't want to forget to say this. Sarah, I don't know if I told you this or not, but in my last contraction, in my very last push as this baby was coming out, I was literally thinking about you. I saw your face in my head. Did I tell you this?
No.
Right before I gave birth, Sarah came to my house and showed me the elongated 25-minute version of what I think all of you have seen on Instagram, which is 30 delivering winter. But my favorite part about birth videos versus what goes on the internet is that music on top of a birth video makes it look and feel completely different. The reality of birth is that it is hard and messy, even in the most beautiful, spaces and places. And so Sarah's birth video, I remember her screaming at the top of her lungs, as we all do, roaring and pushing and all the fire, right? The fire was there. And I remember thinking I've got to find that fire again. Is that fire in me still? I don't know if fire. And so as I was in my very last push, and I watched the video back, and I remember the moment where I was thinking about Sarah's face. It's almost as intimate as being what if you're having sex with your husband and thinking about your best friend's family?
That's amazing.
That intimate of a moment. Because I remember going, no, why are you thinking about Sarah right now? Like, get back in.
Oh my God.
So anyway, that made me sweat a little. I just didn't want to forget to mention that I was literally going, I can do this just like Sarah was doing this.
That is so amazing. And I'm so honored. But I remember, I just have to say this is because this is kind of where we are right now in your story, is that it was like a couple weeks before you were to give birth. And I remember the reason I showed you that video is because your first birth had gone quickly, I think. Like there was a lot happening like on top of each other, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. And you were talking about how, like, what if I don't have that time to ride those waves? And like, you know, you were at, and I told you to like, this is what my Dr. Goldberg had said to me, as he had said, you have to let go of the births before. And you need to know that every birth is a new experience, and just like go into it with like a clean slate and an open mind. Like you ride every wave, take every moment. And so I remember having that conversation with you and being like, look, let me show you these moments in between where like I just stand back up again and I'm like, whoo, you know, and then it's like, you know, like, and then it goes back into it. So I wanted you to see that, like, even towards the end, you could have this moment. It doesn't mean that it's going to be this other way. Anyway, that's why we were having that moment.
So if you listen to our show, you know that Sarah and I are baby obsessed. We keep trying to convince the old hubbaroons to have more babies with us, which hopefully they will. But I wanted to share this crazy story because, look, I've been wanting to have kids since I was a teenager, really. But when I was really seriously thinking about it, I went to my doctor. I was probably 26, 27. And he was like, okay, so how long have you been having prenatals? And I don't know if this was anyone else's experience, but I was like, wait, what? Don't you just take that when you get pregnant? And he was like, no, the recommendation is that you're supposed to take prenatal supplements 3 to 4 months before even wanting to conceive. So that really threw me for a loop. And I think, you know, there's that added pressure of just knowing that pregnancy and postpartum are some of the most nutritionally demanding times in a woman's life. And of course, we know that our baby's health now and for years to come, it's really truly influenced by our nutrient status. So then I was like, okay, where do I go? Like, what do I do?
And there's so many prenatals out there. But if you're anything like me, I get so nauseous when taking a pill. In my first couple of pregnancies, I would get so sick. And so in my last pregnancy, my friend was like, oh, I use this brand called Needed, and they have a prenatal multi. It's for before, during, and after. And it's a vanilla powder. So you can put it on your food, you can drink it, you can use it before, during, and after pregnancy. And it's all the nutrients that you need, which is just so fantastic.
And no nausea. I can tell you guys, no nausea. Yeah, it was amazing. I had it with Prairie and it was such a game changer. I remember feeling so afraid in the mornings. Like I'd eat my breakfast and I'd have this huge pill and I was like, oh, here it comes.
It's going to get stuck for the next few hours. Get stuck in my throat.
Yeah, I know.
And Needed was actually designed by women's health experts that test nutrient levels based on the latest research and in-practice insights from thousands of women. And it's the #1 nutrition brand recommended and used by more than 4,000 women health experts, midwives, doctors, functional medicine doctors, OBGYNs. When I found that out, I was completely blown away. But this is something that so many of my friends have been talking about lately.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. And we love that Needed also offers a premium supplement for every single stage of motherhood. So from egg quality support for women trying to conceive, shout out to Sarah, woo woo, to a lactation support plan for breastfeeding mums like me who hasn't stopped breastfeeding since 2014.
There's just so much on the journey to motherhood that we can't control, but nutrition is a big one that we actually can't control.
Yeah, guys. And now you can join us on the Needed journey. Head over to thisisneeded.com and use code MOTHERDAYS, that's Mother Days with a Z, for 20% off your first month of Needed products.
And you were so right. You were so right. It was a totally different birth and experience, even like physically. I actually, because I think we talked about this, I had rolling contractions with my daughter where it was like one after the other and I had no break. And I talked to Abby a lot about that because it really scared me. I was actually feeling a lot of fear. And then you start reading about how fear makes the body shut down and how you can't. Yeah. It's like, oh no. So what if this time I have that and the fear? And so maybe nothing's going to happen. The baby will never come out. And, just getting to that, you get to that place.
And Nikki, how did you do a specific fear clearing to move through that? Or was it enough just to sit and talk with Abby and be like, here's the truth. I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling afraid that I'm not going to be able to handle that kind of experience again. Or did you actively go out and say, right, I need a fear clearing meditation. I need to just get this out of my body before it's time?
I did both. So one like mantra that I had in my head was just that there's something on the other side of fear. And I kept visualizing that on the other side of fear, there was something really beautiful. And, sometimes like fear and excitement can actually be the same thing and feel really similar. And our body doesn't know how to separate them. So that's what I kept telling myself is like, you're not afraid, you're excited. You're really anxious. So your body's like locking up and you're feeling really nervous, but that's not nerves, that's excitement. So I kept like trying to, that was my headspace. And then I called Abby. She could probably tell the story better than I can, but I called Abby, I think it was like a Thursday or a Friday because it was like a new moon or something happening. And I called her and I burst into tears and I was like, I don't think I can do it. What if I can't do it? And this is like the beauty of, by the way, this is going to be the theme of this conversation is the difference between a midwife and a doctor, which I love both. I had both at my birth, so I cannot emphasize that enough. This is not like this is an and, not an or. But the difference between having a midwife or having Abby, maybe not just that midwife, but having an Abby and a doctor is that you can pick up the phone and call. And having that is everything, because after that conversation, I was like, okay, I've got my shoes back on, I've got my pants back on, I'm ready to do this. I'm not a mess anymore. I can brush my teeth. Like I was crumbled for a second.
And Abby, what did you say in that moment to her? Like,
so she had asked me for something very specific. So she had called and said, like, I'm losing it a little bit. I'm very scared. And I don't think she could particularly like put her finger on exactly what she was afraid of. It wasn't like, I'm afraid something's going to go wrong with the baby. I'm afraid to go on labor again. It was just like in general, like I'm afraid of this experience and how fast it's approaching. And she said, just tell me some good birth stories. Oh, I did. That's it. She said, just tell me some good birth stories. And I had a repeat client of mine have a baby just a couple days before that. And it was, just this beautiful sort of seamless, just great labor where she was chatting in between contractions. And then it was like she'd have one and she'd kind of get into it. And then she'd go right back to telling whatever story she had left off at. And, it was like, she went to the bathroom for a second and came back and was like, my water just broke, I'm having a baby. And, pushed her baby out into the world, hop back in the birth tub and push her baby out into the world 8 minutes later. And so it was this great story of like, see, it doesn't have to be this, backbreaking, mind-altering experience all the time. It can be this sort of like fun, social event almost where you're having a conversation with the people around you, you're smiling in between contractions, and then yes, you're going to go into it for that minute. But then you pop out of it. And I think especially when you're planning for a home birth and you're planning to be in an environment where you really feel safe, and the beauty of being at home is it's just the people you select to be around you. There's never a stranger that's walking out of the room. There's nobody there that you haven't personally invited to be in that space with you. And so in a lot of ways, it does feel kind of like this party that you planned for yourself, These are the guests. have. These are the guests that I want to hear. These are the people that I trust to be here with me. These are the people I'm going to lean into when I need them to kind of refocus and recenter me. So anyways, I told her some good birth stories, and we just talked through if there was like something in particular that we could work through. But I think that was really in the moment that seemed to be all that she really needed.
I'm remembering now. It's because right as I was approaching sort of the end, I had a lot of people calling me, telling me why I shouldn't have a home birth.
Yep.
Right.
There's a lot of that.
Yes.
What? And it's always, by the way, it's always out of love. So it's never anyone trying to do anything bad or malicious. It's always.
It wasn't me.
No, it wasn't.
I'm kidding.
It wasn't you.
Gosh.
It was people wanting to tell me all the stories about a friend of a friend. You know?
Scary stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And by the way,
wow.
those stories can be real. And I'm sure that many of them are. And then I'm sure maybe some of them have kind of, maybe there's some things lost in translation. And maybe it didn't have anything to do with being at home. But
wow.
We always hear about the squeaky wheel. And so it just sounds very scary. And I love to I want to honor those stories. But also when you get down to it and you really dissect them and talk about them, a lot of times the mothers will come forward even with their providers there and say, this wasn't because we were at home, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I remember putting a boundary up, I think for my second or third, because that started happening to me too.
Yeah.
And it was ooh, this happened. And oh gosh. And just even some of the words people were using, excruciating and it's a nightmare, things like this. I was I was letting it penetrate my space. And I was I'm so sorry. I love you. I so appreciate you, but I'm just trying to keep my energy in my space really positive. So I'm curating the things that I'm reading and bringing on board, and would love to talk about this after I've had the baby, and let's share all the different stories that we've all had. But just in this lead up, I've just got to keep this space really sacred and curated for myself. And because I was suddenly got spun out. It's excruciating that everyone's explaining it as excruciating like that. Even now I can feel tensing up.
Yeah.
It's really doing yourself a disservice when you're having to take these things on board. So, wow, that's really interesting, Nikki. And you're right. It's out of love generally.
And concern and wanting the best outcome. And, and I totally get it. By the way, I think I've probably at some point in my life been guilty of doing that in some capacity, maybe not surrounding home birth, but surrounding something, similar. So it was a good sort of check-in for myself too. At what point in our life do we give unsolicited advice and thoughts without having that, as an ask first, So it was good for me to check in with myself too. But, the internet, it's also a weird place, and it kind of the algorithms of things start to feed you what you're looking at. And so even in that time before that phone call to Abby, Instagram was showing me all the scary births in the world too.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. That is really interesting because, it's weird. It's set up to show you the scariest thing that's going to give you the most reaction. I mean, that's just the way that it is. And so if you wonder why, all of a sudden you're starting to feel a lot of anxiety surrounding something that you're seeing constantly, it's because that is how this whole thing, there's a really great podcast episode from the Daily that explains exactly how they do this in the algorithm and why they're doing it, and how YouTube and all of these things exploded based on exactly that fear. And so that is another really great tip from you for all you moms listening out there, to put the boundary up with social media and anything that you're Googling and looking at, because you can go, oh, wait a minute, this is coming at me because I'm this is something that I was nervous about. And now I'm going to get lots of this in my feed. And so the boundary is so important.
I'm about to be a doula. I'm not a trained doula, so I can't really say a doula, but I'm about to be doula-like. Although yesterday I was I should just get my doula certificate for sure. But I was I love birth so much, I should just do that. Anyway.
I mean, yes, you should.
So my friend is 38 weeks pregnant right now. And the same thing, I think she's been looking at a lot of different videos, and there are I have a list of like 5 or 6 different midwives and birth photographers, and like different organizations that I follow, and I tag her in all of them. Every time a beautiful birth comes up on Instagram, I'm tagging her, like sending them to her, because the more she's watching those ones, they're the ones that are going to come up. So I'm like, just watch it. Just watch it. Even if it's just for the algorithm.
You're feeding her algorithm.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Teresa's outsmarted it all. You guys. She's really got it down.
True, you can do that. You can kind of like play in with the system a little bit and say, okay, I see what you're doing. I'll play that game too. I mean, it's smart that you did that.
True.
It's the one experience that you have in your life that you're completely not in control of. And so I think like for all of us here that are juggling multiple things, I mean, I know that everybody in this room has, you know, a lot happening, let's put it that way, with work and kids and life, and sometimes multiple jobs and things, you know. Thank God Abby doesn't have multiple jobs, because I'm really grateful that we're focused only in one area. But for all of us who have that happening, like, we develop these very type A personalities where, you know, you have to, you know, do things on time, get things out, you know, everything has to be kind of like coordinated, organized. And so as you go into birth and you realize none of it can be planned, none of it can be coordinated, not the timing, not the, you know, end result of it. Like, it's sort of whatever's written in the stars, you know? And that was my area for me. Was I was like looking down at this giant belly, and it was a very big belly. I mean, it was a big belly, and it was also a triangle belly, which we can talk about in a minute. But we were all convinced that the baby was transverse for like flipping all over the place for a long time.
Wow.
Well, you did a great job growing that belly, girlfriend.
Even Sarah was like, "I am so impressed."
I was impressed.
I know. I'm gonna
have yes, girl.
Some cool pics for when you release this episode, and you're gonna see that belly in there. You're also gonna see me pressing my head into Abby's boobs, like
a nice little pillow.
Oh my God. I cannot wait. Those are my favorite. Those like raw, amazing birth photos are my favorite.
Down my belly, being like, so this is coming out. Like, this is happening no matter what. And there's no way, I'm not stopping this. Like, this train is moving, and I can't back out. I can't go the other direction. I'm definitely not having, I mean, unless I needed to, I'm definitely not going the route of like a voluntary cesarean, because that's not my plan. And epidurals scare me too much. I mean, listen, nobody's like excited about feeling, you know, all of the big feelings that we feel, but I'm definitely more scared of needles than I am of that. So that was not my route. So I was like, okay, this is happening, and there's nothing I can do to stop the train. And that's when I started getting the anxiety. It's like, is it going to be today, tomorrow, the next day? You know, I'm already 2 weeks past, even though I was still 2 weeks early.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's so
really funny. Yeah, I remember that, because it was like a beautiful thing where you had to, for someone who's so organized and such a like boss in life, like you really had to surrender to the process. And the baby was like, yeah, no, this is not coming on anyone else's time except for my own time, which is just like so cool that it sort of like put you in that position. So take us to that time, like when you were like, okay, I'm done. You've had this call with Abby, and now you've heard these birth stories, and like, when, you know, how many days or weeks after that call did the first inkling of like, wait a minute, am I in labor? Am I not in labor? Is this happening?
She knows. There you go. 10 days. 10 days.
Wow.
10 more
okay,
days.
10
more
days.
I mean, I think it's important also to highlight why, you know, for other women, why it can be so detrimental when someone is telling you you're going to go into labor early, they're for sure going to come early. You're you know, knowing exact dilation and stations. Why I think I strive to kind of step away from those things. I love Nikki's doctor. I hold him so dear to my heart. I can count him as a dear, dear colleague of mine. But it's definitely why I tend to take a different perspective on things like that. Because again, each baby has their own path. They're going to write their own narrative. They're going to where one baby might come early and the next one could come very late. So you really have to be open and surrender to that baby's timeline. We try to take the wheel, but ultimately we really have to sort of relinquish control to the baby in a lot of situations. They become that driver. But it was, we had that call. It was more than a week after that labor started.
And also, Abby kept reminding me of something that I was forgetting, which is my partner, Ian. He travels a lot. And when I say a lot, like definitely every week. And, it's sometimes the majority of the week. And he only could block out a certain amount of time to be in Los Angeles. And so he chose to block that time out based on what the sort of prediction of when the baby was coming was going to be. And when the baby didn't come in that timeline, we all started feeling like we were kind of like,
you felt the pressure. Yeah.
So I think a lot of that came from that too. I mean, and that's the majority of the world doesn't have the luxury of controlling their work schedule. So I know that everyone listening will understand that. I mean, he works and he works out of town a lot. So I felt like a tremendous amount of pressure on my body. And Abby reminded me of that in the very end. She was like, oh, Ian's flying next week. He starts traveling again next week. So that's also part of what's going on with you. So then I had to kind of write that story in my head of what it was going to look like if he wasn't there or had to travel and hopefully make it back. Or, and Tez, you have a partner, you guys are, traveling and away from each other a lot. So I'm sure you felt probably something similar at different times.
Yeah, I did with the last baby when Mark had a movie to go shoot.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, he made it, but he left when she was 2 days postpartum. So I had 4 kids of my own. Yeah. Anyway,
it's crazy.
with my mom.
and that, by the way, that happened with, if you guys remember in 2020 with winter, that Eric was supposed to go back to work and they wrote him out of the first 2 episodes. And so it gave us like this really great buffer of time. The day that he'd already missed like 14 days of work for them writing him out for me to have the baby, Winter was 11 days late. So that morning that he was going back to work for the first time since the pandemic was the morning that I went into labor.
I love it.
And I said to him, go to work, shoot out whatever you need to shoot out. I'll call you from the hospital and I'll tell you when I'm on my way to the hospital and you can meet me there because you'll be closer than I am to the hospital. And he was just like, okay.
Wow. I mean, that's so like third baby of you to be like,
I know. I like go to work, get it done.
Yeah.
And I know, and Sarah, I know you like me. Same thing. We both have had great hospital birth experiences, but I just have to say, Abby's going to deliver your next baby at home.
I know. She's been talking about a home birth.
I'm not pregnant.
She's not pregnant. We talk about it as though we already are.
I know. I'm on my period right now.
So am I. Oh my God, period girls.
Synced up.
Yay. I'm too soon, which is really shocking for Abby.
I know. God, sure. So now, okay, Ian's supposed to be going to work. You're like you were a little anxious about that, so you figured that out. So now
she called me and she said, "Are you okay stepping in if Ian's gone? Like, are you going to be my person?" I was like, "Yeah, if you need me if you need me to step in as your partner, I guess I can do that."
She was so my person. It was. I can't even tell you. Like, she's still my person. You know that. She was so my person, and so was Johanna, which I hope you guys have the opportunity to talk to Johanna at some point.
We would love to.
Because that's something that I didn't have the first time that I really felt in such a powerful way this time was like this strong female energy, this like big mama energy that was like filled the room, like such motherly. I didn't have that like overwhelming mom feeling of like, you're safe, I've got you, I'm like wrapping myself around you. That's what I felt in this that was so special. And I think before we had a couple meetings before where Abby said, or meetups, where Abby was like, can you tell me exactly what you want in your birth? And I said, I'm not sure yet. And then as we got closer, we sat down and I was like, okay, so I know exactly what I want in my birth. And she's like, great, let's have that conversation. And one of the things that I said is I really need like a strong energy. Like I need almost like a masculine energy, because that's what I thought. And the irony is what I really needed in that time was like a really soft landing place, like a safe space that was very like motherly. And I really got that. And I have the most beautiful, beautiful photos. There's a woman named Christina King who just took the most, I can't even tell you, if there's one thing to just like, if you're going to splurge on anything, splurge on capturing the moment that you don't ever want to forget. I mean, because I don't have any photos from my daughter's birth, none. And it's everything. Like it's what I look at every day. Like I hold on to these. So Christina was just, it's so special. And to have the moments that I have where I had with Abby and Johanna captured like that are so special. And there's one, I just sent her a video the other day. You guys, I know I keep fast forwarding, but there's this funny little clip of me saying, I wasn't really aware of Christina's presence during the birth. And I definitely wasn't aware that Ian was like rolling a little bit of iPhone video. there's a moment where I'm hugging Abby and I whisper to her, and you actually hear the whisper, and he caught it on camera, where I say, thank you so much for all the hugs. And she goes, you're welcome, but in like the most gentle way. It was like in between a contraction, I just said, thank you so much for all the hugs right now. And she goes, you're welcome. And it was just so
oh my gosh.
sweet, and it makes me so teary. Okay, so leading up to the birth, so I call her and it's like a Friday, and I say, I want a membrane sweep. That's it. I actually can't. I can't take the anxiety anymore of like, is Ian going to be here and what's happening? And, I have to make sure my daughter's like set up. And, I still live an hour plus away from the city. And so I was planning on giving birth in a family member's home close to the hospital. And so all these things were just, I'm sure you guys have experienced this too, but as you get closer to the birth, every day people call you and go, so are you feeling anything? Are there contractions? God. Are you going to labor? And you're like,
go away.
I know. I knew that would get Tez too, because I think at one point was it Forrest? We started telling everyone about Forrest. You're like, I love you. You can't call me anymore.
I'm done.
So because at my baby shower, we thought we had like a predicted time or date. Everyone was calling during that time. And I'm talking like, I had probably 10 to 20 people a day calling me going, so I'm wearing the bracelet. I've got the beads on. Is now the time? Do I light the candle? And the best part is the text messages too, because now that's how the world communicates. So everyone's sending a text like, any contractions? And you write back, well, not yet. Okay, but are you feeling anything at all? Well, not really. Has your doctor said if you're dilated?
Oh, God.
Can I call you later? Can I write you later? And so I called Abby. Again, by the way, everyone has the best vision. So I called Abby. I'm like, okay, membrane sweep. We're on it. This worked with my daughter. Like, I'm ready to rock and roll. You're just going to touch that cervix and I'm going to go into labor. Like, that's it. And it didn't happen that way. I go to her house. She gives me a sweep. She's like, I'm going to walk your cervix forward. She'll tell you what that is. That's a whole other new experience. My cervix was walking. And the baby, and I'm not in labor. Wow. Okay. So then the next day I go in to my doctor who wanted to see me anyway to do just an NST. And he's like, I'm going to do a membrane sweep. He does a sweep. A few hours later, you're not in labor? I'm shocked. He's calling Abby. He's like, I'm shocked. I'm not in labor. So suddenly, like, none of my plans are working, right? Again, the big lesson of they really choose when they're coming into the world.
Yeah.
So that night, all bets were on the table and everybody was sure I was going into labor, and I'm not in labor. So I go to the park and I start curb walking, and I'm doing all the things at this point, guys. Like, I'm like bouncing on the balls. I'm curb walking. I'm taking all the right baths. I'm walking the cervix. Like, everything's happening. I'm jogging the cervix. I'm not even walking it.
And what's your technical, like, are you technically over 40 weeks at this point?
Yeah, I'm technically 40 plus 4 at this point. And so I go in for a third sweep.
You sound like me. I'm the perpetual sweeper. I'm like, and another one, and another one.
Let me guess. You also probably pee on 9 pregnancy tests.
Oh, God.
Wait, doesn't everybody do that? You don't buy ovulation kits because they're cheaper than pregnancy kits and keep paying.
That's right.
Yep.
So I call Abby and I'm like, so I'm not going into labor tonight, so it's just what it is. And she's like, okay, get a good night's sleep. I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And this is I nodded my head a little bit because I feel like it never goes quite that fast. She'll like call me at 9:30. I'm putting my kid to sleep, and then like 45 minutes later, we're like, oh, okay, you go to sleep, I'll go to sleep, we'll talk tomorrow.
I know, the Nikki phone calls are my favorite.
Yeah, of course, they're amazing.
The Nikki call, and by the way, Abby's so generous with her time, which I love, because she'll pick up every time. And still to this day, I'm not expecting her to, like, I'll write her and go, I'm going to text you instead of, I'm not going to call you because I don't want to bother you, but I have a quick question, and she picks up the phone first. And that, like, just the sisterhood of that, just that, like, again, that, like, motherly energy of I'm going to take care of you is,
yes,
you can't, that's not something that you, I don't know, in my opinion, it's not something that you learn, like, it's part of who you are, you know, it's like, you want to show up for people in that way, or you don't do it because you're supposed to, you do it because you want to, and you always feel like she wants to be there. And I wrote you a whole series of texts about this, Sarah, just about how, like, my whole hope in doing this episode together is to really talk about just the care that women don't get, and how I've seen that in such potent form postpartum. I have many friends that have had babies, and I don't have a single friend that has had the type of relationship or care that I've had in this experience, and my heart aches for them, actually, because this is what everybody deserves. And we live in a country that is not set up for that. We have a healthcare system that's not set up for that. We have a culture that does not support or acknowledge that. And most women are actually overpaying and getting less than what they deserve, just by virtue of how our healthcare is set up to kind of monetize women's experiences in that way. And I kept saying to Abby, like, I feel like you're going above and beyond for me. And I didn't mean for me in any special way, like for me as opposed to someone else. I just was like, I feel like this is above and beyond. And she's like, Nikki, this is what I do. This is what I do for everything. This is my life's work and my life's mission. And so anyway,
I just kind of want to touch on that really quickly. My oldest is 11, he'll be 12 in a couple of months from now. My youngest is 2.5. And so, and there's one more child in between. They're not that far out. But when my 11-year-old was born, you know, I had midwife. My aunt is a midwife. She's been a midwife for almost 25 years now. She was very much my mentor. She was, you know, the person who really first introduced me to midwifery care. And I remember actually going to her office when I went to USC, and I drove down to Orange County to see her, and I was in her office, and she was having what must have been a 6-week postpartum visit. And you could tell that there was a sense of sadness, like they were leaving each other. There was this parting of ways, like, okay, I'll see you with the next pregnancy, or, you know, just pop in when you have some time, and if I'm free, I would love to, you know, hold your baby. And they gave each other this really deep, long hug. I remember thinking, like, man, I've never hugged a doctor in my life. Like, I don't hugged any of my care providers, let alone been like, wow, I'm really sad to be leaving you. You know, generally you have sort of this very superficial relationship. And I think that first kind of planted the seed for me and what I would be looking for in a care provider. So fast forward, I get pregnant with my son, and I'm in sort of this group midwifery practice. And I have him, and I'm sleep deprived, and breastfeeding isn't going well. And I felt like for days I was really in the trenches. And I'm someone who had my aunt on speed dial. I could call her any time of day and she would pick up for me. And I remember my aunt and my grandmother, another aunt and my grandmother came to visit me, and my aunt had breastfed her daughter into toddlerhood, and was such a huge, you know, breastfeeding advocate. She, you know, just kind of stroked my head and talked me through, you know, what was happening, and helped me out of, you know, just what felt like a very dark place at the time. You're really sleep deprived, and you have this, you've gone through, you know, what is what was arguably obviously the most transformative experience of my life. And I'm on the other side of it. And now I'm like, but none of this is working, and it's supposed to work, and it's just not working the way it's meant to, or it doesn't seem like it's ever going to. And having those people that I could connect with to really talk me out of that space and help me, like hold my hand as I walked out of it. You know, I was 36 weeks pregnant with my son, working in politics when I decided I was going to become a midwife. I had this unbelievable relationship with my, you know, I had seen this unbelievable relationship that my aunt built with her clients. I had, you know, a really strong connection with one of the midwives in the practice that I was seeing. And it was like, I want to do this every day. I can't have babies every day. I don't want to do that for every day.
Damn.
I want to be a part of this journey. And while I think that there's so much that we can offer in the prenatal space in terms of really sort of, you know, just kind of talking women through, again, what is obviously like a complicated and hormonal time in their lives as they're navigating a lot of different things, hearing a lot of different stories, and really trying to figure out what their path is. There's so much room in that postpartum phase. And I think midwives really show up or at least, you know, that's my goal, is to show up at that time. Birth is, it's one day. It's one day. But on the other side of that, there is a whole new person that has been birthed, right? You as the mom, this baby that you've now brought into the world. And our system does lack. You know, I always say my friends are so lucky because they know they can just call me whenever.
That's amazing.
But especially for my clients, just really, you know, showing up for them during that time, because there's not enough resources out there to really support women as they make that transitional experience. But it was really my own experiences that definitely define that as sort of, you know, a huge focus of my practice and who I am as a midwife today, very much because of that first birth and that first postpartum period.
And I'll just say, the care that I have needed actually has all been in the postpartum space for the most part. Like I would call, I mean, it was obviously a very special moment, and I'm going to share more of it here, but I would call my birth relatively uneventful in that it was, you know, pretty seamless and fairly short and all of those things. And again, like it's one day, right? And then what I've sort of needed, I guess needed is the right word, because I really needed it. The care and the conversation and the sort of attention to detail and the answers to the questions, that's all been in this postpartum time. And you would think as a second time mom, you know, with my daughter, I didn't really have many questions. I mean, breastfeeding was fairly seamless. Everything kind of went according to plan. You know, I had this kind of chaotic birth, but then my postpartum time was pretty quiet and pretty simple and easy and straightforward. And, you know, here we are, and it's my second baby, and I had kind of the reverse experience where my birth was very seamless and pretty simple and pretty easy. And then the postpartum hurdles that we've hit really came out of nowhere. You know, I remember like the first 3, 4, or 5 days that, you know, Abby was checking in with me, which, by the way, how incredible is that? She was like at my house almost every day after I gave birth. You were.
Oh my gosh, you'd be like, wait, you don't show up to my house every day.
I was here. There were things that were really necessary, and she would show up if there was any question that I had or a problem. Like she got in her car at 11 o'clock at night, which you did for another client too that same week. It was the second time mom, you said also, who, you know, because I was worried that the baby wasn't able to latch properly and wasn't getting, you know, proper nutrients. And so she's like, I'm coming over to weigh the baby because I won't sleep tonight if I don't know that the baby is feeding properly. And it was 11 o'clock at night. And I was like, what?
Oh my God.
Are you sure you want to do that? And then she told me a story about a woman, she doesn't share who, of course, but a woman, you know, in the same boat, second time mom that same week, who needed something very similar. She's like, Nikki, I won't go to sleep.
So the requisite prenatal schedule is always 3 visits in the first 2 weeks, right? So your standard of care in the US is to check out, you have your hospital discharge, and then you're going to see your OB at 6 weeks. I generally will see my clients between 4 and 5 times in the first 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, really. But it has to be client focused, and it has to be client led. Not everyone's postpartum experience is going to look exactly the same. And so where some clients will barely call me in the postpartum period because everything is just functioning, you know, just as it should be. I have others. So actually it was a 4th time mom who was kind of going through things very similar to Nikki at the same time. And so I was, you know, juggling these 2 moms who had had these, you know, beautiful breastfeeding experiences in the past, and now we're like facing all these challenges. So I was popping over to her house a couple times a week to weigh her baby, popping over here to kind of troubleshoot and weigh Nikki's baby. But you have to, I don't know, I feel like I have to show up in the postpartum period that way because I just, again, I have virtually a 0% postpartum depression rate in the immediate postpartum period. In the first 8 weeks, I have zero. None of my clients have ever faced postpartum depression. There have been times where it's kind of crept up later on, but still 4 months, 6 months, 8 months down the road, they're calling me. I'm generally their first call to say, hey, something isn't right and I need help with this. And I really chalk that up to how I show up for my clients in that postpartum period. You know, it's like they always have a resource, and it's not the internet, and it's not a friend who did things entirely different than they intend on doing things, you know, that in some ways can just make them feel like they're doing all the wrong things. It's showing up in the way that they need me to also. No two clients are ever going to be the same. No two experiences are ever going to be the same. And so it's also, you know, tailoring your care to the person that you're dealing with. Not just, again, like having the same type of care for every person, but rather showing up for them in the way that they need me to show up. I mean, Nikki kind of touched on her birth and bearing her head in my chest, but not all of my clients are even going to need that. You know, you show up the way that someone needs you. You meet them where they're at. It should never look exactly the same across the board.
I needed a lot of hugs.
Lots of hugs.
Wow. Okay. This is amazing to have all of this context as well. And you're 40 plus 4, 5, 6. I don't know how far it went, but you were able to surrender to the fact that this baby had his own divine timing. And then when did you think like, all right, that feels different? This feels like it's starting.
I didn't at all. So I go to sleep that night. So I call Abby. It's like 9:45 or 9 o'clock, something like that. And I said, so it's not happening. I'm going to go to sleep. And everybody lose. Good thing no one's putting real money on this because everyone's losing. Okay. So I did a lot of curb walking. I actually just looked at the photo the other day. I'm at the park at 7:30 at night.
And your belly is all
tied up. We have down. Yeah. I've got, she's got Johanna on the line teaching me like proper bindings. We want to make sure the baby doesn't shift because we keep thinking like, is the baby going transverse or what's going on?
I wasn't thinking that.
I don't know. I mean, I went in to get some scans a couple times.
Yeah. That's earlier on though, but not at 40 plus weeks. I think he was remember he was so settled and so.
But what about the pictures I sent you where I was like,
your belly looks square.
Yeah, the square.
It was contracted. Okay. But at this point, he's locked and loaded. That was the problem.
Yeah, you're right. For like 2 weeks, you're like, he's gonna fall out.
He's just gonna fall out.
Yeah, she kept saying to me, it was really cute. She's like, so that baby's 2 inches away from fresh air, so don't worry, it's gonna be. I know. I held on to that. I was like, 2 inches away. That's not a lot of pushing. 2 inches.
Yeah,
Can you push in inches? So I said, go to sleep, but it's not happening. And thank goodness I actually went to sleep because, it's really hard to like get a couple hours under your belt and then, feel like you're just a wreck in the middle of the night, right? So I went to sleep. I thought she did too, but she didn't. I went to sleep at like 9:45 or 10 and I wake up at midnight. This little boy, my water never broke. He kicked and broke my water. Like it was, so the interesting thing is with my daughter, I had a reversal experience where I was in like a little bit of labor-ish all night. And then around like 6:30 in the morning, I was going, oh, wow, these contractions are kind of real. And then my water broke and I felt it break.
Okay.
With my son, I had no signs of labor. I went to sleep a little disappointed, to be honest with you, because I just can't take it anymore, the waiting. And I go to sleep and it was like pop, like I swear I could hear it. Like that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
And this boy was such a kicker in my belly anyway. I mean, there were moments where I would like just hold on to the edges of a chair and like pray that he wasn't going to start kicking because it was always so intense. It was like big, strong, powerful legs under my rib cage. And it would sometimes like send me through the roof. So I know that's what happened. So in my sleep, and it was so sweet. You guys, my water broke on my lucky number and he was born at a time that equaled my lucky number. It was like the sweetest thing. So my water breaks And I go, and I literally like jolt up and I go, my water broke. And Ian, I've never seen anything like it. He shoots up like a cartoon character and starts screaming at the top of his lungs. And it must have like caught him in a moment where it like was like a bad dream or something. Because he shoots up and he starts running, races to the door and goes, your water broke, and slams on all the lights like this.
Oh my gosh.
I start yelling, you're gonna wake up our daughter. Please stop. Don't panic. What's wrong? And he's like still not fully awake. Like he turns to every ear and sitting at the thing. I'm like, man, calm. Like everything's okay. It just broke, but I'm okay. Like everything's fine.
Oh my God.
And so I walk slowly into the room and I pick up the phone and I call Abby and I go, so my water broke, but I don't think I'm in labor. So just go to sleep. And she goes, no, I'm not going to sleep. Why don't you get in the car and start driving into the city? And I was like, well, I'm not having any contractions, so I don't think I'm actually in labor. I think my water just broke. She's like, your contractions are going to start in like 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah. Get in the car and start driving, because everybody knew that my daughter came in like 3 or 4 hours. So this would likely be like a similar, experience, if not sooner. And no one wanted me to have the baby in the car.
And we knew, at this point, we also knew she's had memory tubes. We knew exactly how far dilated she is, it was good. And then
I was like 3 centimeters dilated.
Yeah, and like barely enough of the cervix. We were like 80-90% of face, so like her cervix is thin to practically nothing. And we know that this baby's 2 inches from fresh air. And she's got a tiny thread ahead of her. And now her water's broken. And she's having a second baby after her first past labor. It was like,
yeah, you got about 5 minutes before that shit starts up.
Normally I'd be like, yeah, cool, just like settle in until you start having contractions. But like all those factors combined, it was like, the car ride's probably going to start your contractions. We're not going to have a lot of time once the contraction starts. Like, let's just shift locations. And then also, there's something to be said about getting settled without your hair on fire. Yeah. And like just getting to that place where you can kind of just let go and start laboring, as opposed to getting to that place with your hair on fire and like we're scrambling to get all the pieces together. Because at this point, I didn't even know what that meant though, like without your hair on fire. Because in my experience, like you go to the hospital when your hair is on fire, you know? You wait until you're 9 centimeters dilated to go to the hospital. And so that to me was like, what do you mean? Like I should get there before I'm in the thick of it? Why would I do that? You know? Mostly my concern was that I felt bad that everybody would be awake all night. And I don't know why I was so concerned about that, but I was like, I just want you to go back to sleep. I don't want you to call my doctor or Christina. I want everyone to get a good night's sleep, and I'll call you when I think this is really happening. And Abby was like, okay, yeah, I'll get in the car in a few minutes. I'll see you in a little bit.
So I was awake. There's nothing.
Yeah.
I think I stayed awake watching like Daisy Jones in the Six. I go to bed at like 9:30 every night, and I was so sucked in that I was like, oh, okay, I'm just going to keep going. So by the time she called me, I think I had just gotten into bed and I hadn't fallen asleep yet. So sorry. There's nothing worse than getting called an hour after you fall asleep. So I was like, I'm awake. I'm gonna have some coffee and power through this with my life. I can do this.
Yeah, circadian rhythm is so messed up before it's fun.
So I know it's not gonna be very long.
By the way, if you look through my text messages with Abby, I just feel so bad that all the photos, you know how you can like click on the photo section of what you've sent someone? There's like nothing I've sent Abby that up until this point, at least, that isn't like blood, mucus, like everything you're sending.
Oh my God. Amazing.
And what should this look like? And so I send her a picture as soon as, we hang up the phone, and I'm like, is this normal? Because obviously like a giant, blood, big blob of blood. And I was like, this isn't meconium, right? It's blood. And like, this is your conversation with your midwife.
So this is my daily life. I was once at lunch with one of my best friends, and over the span of like 15 minutes, I got pictures of a blood clot, postpartum, and a dirty diaper. And she's like, you are just the most disgusting person. Not to have 3 babies.
I've sent you more of those.
And too. Yeah. And she has sent me disgusting pictures like that. So I don't actually find them disgusting. I find them very normal. But she has sent me disgusting pictures too.
Here's a Bayo ad in the meantime.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I know we don't want to, but we're going to pause right here, and we will be back next week with part 2 of Nikki's birth story. Bye.
Yeah.